There are indeed a few key points being discussed this year at the COP30. One of the main things is that countries are submitting their so-called nationally determined contributions or their national climate plans. And basically, in these plans, countries announce what it is they're going to commit to in terms of reducing their greenhouse gas emissions and how are they looking to stay beyond and below the goal of 1.5 degrees temperature warming compared to pre-industrial levels. And this is really important because this is collectively going to show where are we at as a planet on climate. In China, President Xi just in September announced the Chinese commitments in China's nationally determined contribution of reducing economy-wide net greenhouse gas emissions by 7 to 10% compared to peak levels by 2035, increasing the share of non-fossil fuels in total energy consumption to over 30%, and expanding installed capacity of wind and solar power to over 6 times 2020 levels, with a goal of a total 3,600 gigawatts. And China has already surpassed some of these targets ahead of schedule. So in addition to these national climate plans, another critical area that's being negotiated at COP30 is how do we deal with the impacts of climate change, droughts, floods, and heat waves, and how do we finance that? So there has been a joint global target on adaptation finance to double adaptation finance this year, and this target expires now. So we need to now have a new target for countries to help better support communities who are most impacted by climate change, and how can they have more climate resilient health, water, food, and livelihood systems, as well as infrastructure. This is another key decision we need at the COP, a new adaptation finance target. And then I'd say the final area is that there's an overall climate finance goal, which was decided at last year's COP, COP29 in Baku in Azerbaijan, of having a goal of 1.3 trillion per year by 2035 from all sources to deliver on climate action. What needs to happen at this COP is to turn this commitment to climate finance into an actual roadmap, into an actual plan of how we're going to get there.
Ms. Ninni, you joined the event at the China Pavilion earlier. So how do you view China's contribution to global climate governance and its efforts to promote international cooperation on green and sustainable development?
It was a really interesting event. Thank you for asking about that. And it really showcased China's South-South cooperation. And the event in the China Pavilion had a range of speakers from China, from Africa, the Caribbean, international agencies. A lot of practical examples were given, for example, on solar energy, clean cook stoves that are promoted as part of China's South-South cooperation. And I learned a lot of that work and from other voices there. We as the IFRC really appreciate China's contribution in supporting other countries in climate actions by sharing China's experiences, technologies, and resources. We're also proud as the IFRC to be working closely with the Chinese government and other Chinese partners in this area. One example of this work is that under the framework of the Global Development and South-South Cooperation Fund, IFRC and the China International Development Cooperation Agency, or CIDCA, are jointly implementing a project in Mongolia. And this is a project that bolsters the resilience and adaptive capacity of communities that are affected by climate change. And it really shows how we can work together and turn commitments into concrete solutions to support people in need, where they're looking at climate resilient livestock, we're looking at early warning systems that reach communities. This is really critical work, and it's something that can empower communities to be more resilient and countries to be more resilient to climate shocks. And we very much as the IFRC stand ready to continue to work hand in hand with China to jointly contribute to this type of global climate action.